to Sanchit Balchandani. Sanchit comes with 10 years of experience into IT industry, and he has expertise in Python programming and creating backend systems. He loves to write code in Python and likes to be involved with open source community in whatever way possible. He is a core member of Hyderabad Python user group and DevOps and SRE user group Hyderabad. In his talk, he would walk us through the latest integration of Docker desktop. With that, warm welcome to Sanchit. Hello, Sanchit. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you, Savita. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you.
Let me just quickly share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yes, yes, Sanchit, we can see.
My VS Code is visible.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can you be a bit audible? I'm not able to hear you.
Is it better now?
Yes, it is better.
Okay, sure. All right. So once again, thank you, Savita, for the introduction. And so today I'm going to talk about this topic called simplified deployments on cloud using Docker Desktop. And there has been some recent release of Docker Desktop that's called Docker Edge. So I'm going to talk about the couple of plugins which have been released with Docker Desktop Edge and how it helps you deploy your local containers from your Docker Desktop to either on AWS ECS or on Azure ACI. Okay, so since Savita has already covered my introduction, but just to give a brief again, I am primarily a Python developer working at EPAM Systems as a lead software engineer, and I'm kind of very involved in the communities. In case you want to talk to me about Hyderabad Python user group or DevOps and SRE user group, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to interact. Okay, so without wasting much effort on my intro, let's talk about the agenda. So what we'll do in this agenda is that we will try and set some context that what this talk is about and why I decided to choose this talk, and what are the current challenges a developer would face or a person who are going to deploy from application from local to cloud. What are current challenges available with either with AWS ECI, AWS ECS, or with Azure ACI. So we'll talk about those challenges. Then I'll give a brief about that. What are the changes Docker and Amazon has come up with regards to ECS plugin, and then we'll see a sample Python application including 3 microservices, and then we'll try and deploy that whole microservices architecture into Amazon ECS, right? And then if the time permits as well, then we will also take a look at that ACI plugin and also a demo of that regard. Same Python application we will try and deploy on Azure ACI as well, and then we may take some questions also. So what this talk is about. So primarily I'm going to talk about these 2 plugins which I just mentioned. So Docker has very recently partnered with Amazon AWS and also with Azure to come up with a couple of plugins for Docker Desktop. So that those 2 plugins allows the developer to deploy containers running in Docker Desktop, which is on your local machine, from there to cloud with just a couple of commands. Okay, and there have been multiple challenges before this one when the plugin were not there, but this plugin tries to ease out the whole experience of developer, and rather than moving to multiple different tools, they can just be on a sit on Docker CLI and then do the whole deployment to either on Azure ACI or on AWS ECS. Okay, so that's the talk is about. I'm going to talk about these 2 plugins and also give a demo on that one. Okay, so the current challenges, if I talk about with regards to these 2, with regards to deployment on cloud, right? So let's say if you are using AWS ECS service, which is basically, okay, I think somebody wants to come in. Okay, yeah. So let's say if I talk about AWS ECS, the process right now is kind of little complicated. If I talk about either the ECS CLI, or if you want to go to your Amazon console and open the ECS service and then try and deploy your application from there itself, after you're done with your local containerization and you are done with your Docker Compose, then if you want to deploy those things there in either in Amazon AWS console or either using ECS CLI, things are not very straightforward. You may have to configure multiple things. You may have to set up your cluster, set up your service definitions, set up your task definitions, etc. Right? So these are multiple things involved at this moment for a developer to take care, just for the deployment to happen from local to cloud. So things are not very seamless at this moment. Okay. And as I said, there are multiple tools involved. You are working with Docker. You have your Docker Compose. Then once you move to your AWS ECS service, then there may be some different compatibility issues with regards to Docker Compose files. So those kind of issues are kind of in place and they're existing. Though there are certain solutions available, I'm not denying the fact that ECS CLI is kind of pretty good and works pretty well. But these things have been there with regards to whole overall experience. And Docker and Amazon and Microsoft have come together. They have developed a couple of plugins for Docker Desktop, which tries to ease out these things for us, right? So these are some of the challenges, and as I said, the process is kind of very lengthy and time taking. So with these plugins, the process has have been simplified, and now with only a couple of commands, you can just deploy from your Docker desktop to either on Amazon ECS or Azure ACI. Okay, so I'll try and make this talk a demo centric so that we don't get much into theory part. So let's move forward. So couple of things to clarify here that right now both of these plugins, either if you talk about AWS ECS or Azure ACI, the plugins which have come out for Docker Desktop for both these services are in beta stage. Okay, so don't use it on production. These are just launched very recently, I think within a month ago. And so if you're trying, you can try it out because it's pretty cool. It eases out your experience. So just for the sake of understanding that these things are coming in future, and right now they are in testing phase. So once that is done, then probably we can start using it in production as well. So one prerequisite of this demo would be that you need to have Docker Desktop Edge version. That is going to be 2.3.3.0 or the later ones. The later one is I think 2.3.3.4. So you can use that as well. And definitely you need to have an AWS account, or if you're working on ACI, Azure ACI, you need to have an Azure account, right? So these are two prerequisites. Now we'll directly jump into demo. So before the demo of ECI plugin, what I'll do, I will try and demo the Python application I'm going to talk about. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to do here is that I have a bunch of microservices. Okay, I think all of us know about microservices, right? That we deploy multiple microservices using containers, and then from containers we take it to cloud. So these are all well-known concepts, right? So I would not focus a lot on explaining the code because we need to save some time. So what essentially I'm doing here, that if you can see, there is an example microservice which is primarily a Python Flask-based service. Okay, it has a couple of APIs written here. If you so these examples are taken from one of the Git repositories from Amazon ECS plugin. So you can also refer the code there itself. But I have tried to make it a little more complicated so that I can include rather than two microservices, I can include three microservices. So right now, in this application, there is one Flask service which has only two API endpoints. In fact, three API endpoints. One is primarily the root API endpoint, wherein this guy comes and talks to Redis and probably tries and includes a times attribute there, and then render that whole stuff into a file called index.html. Okay, even if you don't understand the whole stuff about Python or about HTML, you can just understand that there's an API call happening to this particular Flask microservice, and this guy is returning something. Okay, and then we have a couple of more APIs, that is download, and there is one called check task. Okay, so what is happening here is that we have another microservice which is based on Celery. Okay, so this is basically a task queue, and I wanted to have some asynchronous sort of mechanism here. So Celery and Redis are being used as pub sub here. Okay, and you would keep on pushing your task to Celery queue, and Redis would work as a backend there. So overall, there are three microservices, as I said. One is this application part, wherein my Flask application is there, and then I have task queue available. Okay, so task queue accepts tasks from the Flask service here in this download function. It basically takes two arguments from there. One is the file name and another the URL. So primarily I'm passing a URL to this download function so that it can go ahead and download some image from my URL, okay, and save it into some some location defined in base dir, And before that, we'll sleep for 10 seconds so that we can have some async sort of experience here, right? So pretty simple, nothing complicated. So that's only 3 services. One is Flask, and another one is Celery, and then we have Redis backend, right? So this is about the demo application I'm going to use. Now let's see and jump into the demo. So I like to mention one thing is that because deployment of AWS ECS is time taking. Okay, even if it also in Docker desktop as well, it takes around 10 minutes of time to get deployed. The whole services would be deployed, right? So it was not possible for me to deploy the whole thing here itself. So what I've done, I have recorded a video, a pre-recorded video of my demo. So I'll try and play that video now. Okay. There may be some latency with regards to my voice and these commands. So please bear with me for that. So what essentially is happening here is that I'm right now in my same directory where I showed the example microservice, right? And now I'm trying to do a Docker Compose PS. Basically, I'm trying to see whether there are any services running or not. So there are no containers running at this moment. Now what I'll do, I'll try and show you the Docker Compose file. So the same file which I showed you here, it's also available here. You can take a look at here as well. There are only 3 services: front end, which is nothing but a Flask application. Then we have backend, which is Redis. Then we have Celery, right? Nothing much complicated. It's very pretty simple. And let's go back to the demo. Yeah. So now I will try and build the image. Okay. So you can do Docker Compose build to build your images. Since my image is already built up, so it would already be taken care from cache. You don't need to worry about building it again. Then I will rather try and make it up and running. So I can do Docker Compose up -d, and it shall run my application here. Okay. Yeah. So my services got created. If I can do Docker Compose PS, it will show me whether my services are running fine or not. Okay. So these are up and running. Now, what I'll do now, instead of testing this application locally, what we'll do that we will try and deploy this whole service from local to our AWS ECS plugin, and there itself we will try and test this thing. Okay, so here. Let me take a pause. Before that, I think I'm just going to show whether this services are working fine locally or not. So ignore this command called docker logs. That's you can ignore that. But if you do Docker Compose logs, you can see the logs that the services are running fine and everything is up and running. Okay, so that's about just a sanity check on the services. Now, post that, what I'll do, I will try and push my images to my Docker Hub, okay? Because it's important for you to push your images so that the ECS plugin would have to build your image, because the build parameter there is not supported. So the ECS would not be able to build your images if you add a build keyword in your compose file, right? So it's important that you push your images, and either it is available in your Docker Hub or it's available in a private repository, okay? So you need to take care of that. So I'm just pushing my images here. I did Docker Compose push. It pushed my images, both the Celery one and also the Flask one. It should take a couple of more seconds, I think. Yeah, I think this is done. Now, what we will try and do now, that since our image is being pushed, so we will try and set up some context before. Okay, so I'm just trying to take down the services from local. We will do that. Docker Compose down. Now the services would be removed. Okay, and now I just do a DCPS. So DC is my alias for Docker Compose, so you can ignore that. Now here comes the important part, right? I'll just pause the video here. I'll talk about it first a little. So for us to deploy from Docker desktop to either on AWS ECS or on Azure ACI, we need to be at single place, right? That's all the whole experience is going to be, because we're going to be on a single Docker CLI, and we would be able to deploy from local to our cloud providers, right? So Docker context help to have the local CLI to talk to either on ECS or also on ACI. Okay, so the same way, since our current context is pointing to default, which is the local one, we would try and set up the context for, first of all, for Azure ECS, sorry, for AWS ECS, and then we'll also try and set up for Azure ACI. Okay, now let's again go back to the video. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to do the setup of my context. So the command is basically a Docker ECS setup. Once you do that, you have to enter the context name. I'm putting it as AWS. Once I do that, then it will ask me for the profile name. So I'm adding sandbox. And once you enter sandbox or whatever name you want to do that, once you do that, it will ask you for the region. Okay, your AWS region. So I'm entering AP Southeast -1. Once I do that, it will ask me for my creds. That means my access key and my security key. So you can provide that here. Once I do that, I can copy my secret key now. Okay, and this should do. Yeah, I think with this, I think my context should be available. Now, if I do Docker context ls, I should have two contexts now. So you can see that now I have AWS. I also have default. But right now, since my context is the default one, I can try and switch to AWS. So now I can use Docker context use AWS, and that will move my context from my local to AWS. And I can do Docker context ls to see what is my current context. It shows as AWS. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, since we have switched the context. Okay. Now let's do one thing. Now, so here I'll take a pause again. I'll talk about that. What are the differences between these commands? Okay, so what Docker and Amazon has done that they have defined these custom commands. Okay, which are still supported in Docker desktop. But the intention is they wanted to have some differentiation between the commands for either for AWS and also for Azure. And later on, I think by the time they will have some native commands available, right? As at this moment, you are seeing a specific command to ECS. Okay, and the contests I've created, right? But maybe later on, they will try and improve this command because this is still in a beta stage, and they will try and provide you seamless command so that you don't need to worry about remembering command for either for ECS or for ACI. You can do it using the native commands. But at this moment, the command is called Docker ECS compose PS. Once you do that, your local Docker desktop would connect to AWS and would see whether something is running or not in your ECS. So let me just run the video again. If I do that, it goes and talk to my AWS ECS and says that there is no stack running with this particular example. Okay, suppose that now I'll try and do the compose up so that I can run my containers from local and deploy it directly on the AWS ECS. So this whole stuff which I'm showing here right now, if you can see, this whole stuff takes a lot of time. Okay, that is why the reason I wanted to record the video and show it to you people, and rather than waiting for 10 minutes in the talk itself. So you can see that there are a bunch of things being created. You can see the network is being created, then the service discovery, then your listeners are created, your ingress are getting created, everything which you might want to do. So I have fast forwarded the video here. That's why you see all thing is completed. But this whole stuff would allow you to be on a single CLI screen, and you don't want to go to your AWS ECS, and everything can be done from a single CLI, right? So once this is done, once all of these things and task definition and services and whatnot is being created, then now you can just again and try Docker compose PS. So Docker ECS compose PS. So let me just see if I did that in my video. Yes. So if I do Docker ECS compose PS, you should see that I have my services deployed there. So you can also see that whatever services I tried and deployed on local, on the backend, Zelida, and front end, all of these are automatically created. And also we have the load balancers available as well, right? So we don't need to worry about creating anything. And neither we have to worry about creating the VPCs and configuring the subnets, or worry about enabling the service discovery. Everything is being taken care by default by this plugin itself, right? So since it's available, now let's see. I think we can copy this URL and probably go and check whether it is working fine or not. Yeah, so post this, I'll take a pause here. Okay. Now, what we will do now, we will go to our Amazon console. So you can see, am I still audible? Can somebody confirm?
Yes, you are audible.
Sure, thank you. So if you look at my AWS console, I am right now. So if you can go to AWS, from AWS, you can choose your Elastic Container Services. And once you choose that, then you should have some clusters already up and running. Okay, so I can see my example cluster is already up and running, and there are three services running here. There are three tasks also running. There are no pending tasks. Okay, so I'll just give a brief that in this ECS portal, you will have your task definition, you will have your account settings. If you want to use Amazon ECR, which means Amazon's private Docker registry, you can also use that in case you want. But at this moment, I'm only using Docker Hub. Okay, so once you click on your example cluster, you will see a bunch of services already existing here. So all of these things are already in active mode. So I can go to task and I can see my containers are running, right? So I can click on one of them. Let's say if I click on front end, okay, and I can see that there is a bunch of information available here. So one thing I think I also missed out to tell in between that once you do your deployment from local Docker desktop to AWS ECS, at this moment it only supports ECS Fargate. Okay, you would not be able to deploy it on ECS EC2, which is primarily also available if you try and do that using your Amazon console. If you directly come here and try and deploy, you would have option to choose whether you want to deploy it on Fargate or you want to deploy it on EC2. Okay, so just to give a differentiation, Fargate is completely managed by AWS, and EC2 you'll have full control that how you want to set up, etc. Right? But since the whole experience has to be seamless, that's why you deploy from your local to Fargate directly. Okay, that's why the launch type is mentioned here as Fargate. Okay, then we have a bunch of other services. I mean, bunch of other information that when it was last created, wonder what is the network mode, and yeah, so the default network mode would be AWS VPC, and it is the only network which is supported as of now in ECS Fargate. Okay, so we can't change that. I mean, I hope that later on there will be some customizations available, because at this moment you can't control anything, because even if you get to see that what is the whole file you are to get these all services being created, but at this moment you don't have control because ultimately it's on Fargate, right? So I can copy the public IP now. Just post it here, and my Flask application is running on 5000 ports. So let's hit that. Once I do that, I get to see that my application is running. If I can click on timestamp, which basically talks to Redis. So eventually my Flask service is able to talk to Redis, which is another microservice, right? So this whole thing is working fine, and I'm able to do that, right? Okay, so now what I'll do, one more thing, that I also had one more service, which was this one. Let's here. So I also had a service called Celery, and I was eventually trying to send some tasks to my Celery service, right? So the same thing we will try and test also. Okay, so it's already running. I can see the logs here. It is based on CloudWatch, so you can see that. Okay, now let's try and let's go to Postman and try and hit that API called download. So initially I use my my load balancer URL, but I can also use my IP here. So whatever works for you. So you can find out this load balancer URL from EC2 option. If you go there and then option, click on download, it's a post call. And as I said, in that application, I'm only going to send only two attributes. One is URL and one is file name. Okay, so I'm going to send these things in a body that I could be JSON. If I do that, I should get some output out of here. Yeah. So the output, you can see the pretty output, or you can see the raw output. It says check status of this particular task. So basically the task has been submitted. Now I can click on this task or this API call, and this would make an API call saying this whole public IP on this port, call the check API with the star task ID. Okay, so once I do that, so it says it's a success. Okay, so which means my Flask application also was able to talk to my Celery server. So this whole thing makes this deployment kind of very simple, right? I mean, I did not have to worry about creating the service efficient. I can go again and share that if you are here on your AWS cluster, right, there are a bunch of things being created. So everything is being taken care by this plugin itself. Okay, I didn't have to worry about creating these services. I neither have to worry about creating these task definitions. Right, everything is done. Now, if you want to see that what are the some basic things being created, we can go to VPC. You can also verify whether your VPCs are created or not. So everything is being taken care automatically by ECS itself. So there is a VPC already running. You can also see the subnets for the other containers running. So these are also available. You can try and play around with that. And in case you want to see the load balancer URLs, you can go to EC2, and you can see that your load balancer URL should also be available here. So I can see I have two load balancers, right? I have one for my Redis backend and also for one for I think for Flask. Yeah, so these things are already available here, right? So you can just either you want to do it accessible, you can do that using either using your public IP, or you can do that using your Amazon load balancer URL, right? So this is with regards to the demo of ECS plugin. May I ask how much time I have still pending?
You have 10 to 15 minutes more.
Okay, great. So let's do one thing. Since we have covered the demo of our ECS, right? So we'll also try and do a demo of our Azure ACI as well. So I'll again go back to the same video, which I paused, I think, in between. Where is that? All right, let me just play it again. Okay. So I also recorded my Azure ACI video as well, so that I don't have to spend a lot of time to do that. Okay. Yeah. So I think till this point, we were able to deploy our so from here on, I think I'll start. So the same thing, what I talked about, the Amazon ECS, right? Similar way, Microsoft also has worked with Docker to create this plugin. Okay, and I think they have done a little more. I mean, from a personal opinion, that they have done a little more. Maybe there are some engineering differences behind these plugins, but if I see about the effort to, I mean, ease out the experience of the developer, it's a little more. So I'll talk about why it is a little more. So context, the same way which we did set for AWS ECS, that we will again do for ECI as well. Okay, the same way we have to do it for ECI, so that we can now connect to from local to Azure ACI portal instead of talking to AWS ECS. Okay, so let's just see this video again. So what's happening here is that I'm trying to list out my context. I'm saying it is currently as default. Okay, now I can do Docker login Azure. So yeah, so the primary requisite is that you have to you have to be connected to your Azure portal. Okay, so you don't need to worry about either adding your security key or whatever, right? The way we did that in AWS, it is much more simplified in Azure. Okay, so you just need to type Docker Azure login. Once you do that, your CLI would automatically redirect you to a login screen. Okay, and on the login screen, you can just simply use your Microsoft account, and just with one click itself, once you do that, your login would be successful. Okay, so you don't need to worry about authenticating to Azure with adding some security credentials, etc., right? So once you do that, you have your context up and running. So you have your login done. And now what I'll do, I will try and create the context here. So I'm just copying a command from my notepad. Once I do that, the command is a little different. If you see that the command for AWS ECS was Docker ECS setup, right? So there is a difference between these two commands, as I mentioned previously, that they're still in beta stages. They are trying out these commands, but ultimately you will have some common sort of command later on, okay, to ease out the experience as well. So the command here is the Docker context create ACI in Azure. You can name. So the last one is basically the name of the context. So I'm naming it as Azure. Once you do that, so either you can select the already existing resource group, or you can create a new one. So I'm creating a new one here. Once I do that, it's done. It's how simple it is that you can connect to your Docker, connect to your Azure, and then create a context here. So now if you see, I've done Docker context ls. and now it shows three contexts here: AWS, Azure, and default, right? So it's the same thing which we'll try and do it again. Okay. Now if you do that, I'm now trying to use the Azure context. So you can use the same command, docker context use Azure. Once you do that, then you'll have, so now I'm trying to actually do a Docker compose up. So once my context is set, I'm trying to do Docker compose up. It takes relatively much less time than AWS ECS, maybe because there's some things which are not being done, which are automatically done in ECS, because ECS is trying to create your load balances, etc. Those things are not being done here. I'm not pretty sure on that, but I guess that is why the time is relatively very less if I compare it to AWS ECS. Okay, so if I do that just by Docker Compose Up, I'm on the same application where my Python application is deployed. If I do Docker Compose Up, it should make my application up and running on Azure portal as well. Okay, so now if you do that, you can do Docker PS. So previously the command to check in the ECS was Docker ECS compose PS. Now here it is Docker PS. Okay, and the one difference also here is that with the ECS with ACI plugin, you can not only deploy your compose, you can not only deploy multiple containers, you can also deploy a single containers. Okay, I mean the experiences quite have been kind of very seamless. And on top of that, very recently, I think in this month itself, they have launched a very cool plugin for VS Code. Okay, so this whole stuff which I'm doing it from a CLI, if you don't want to actually go into your CLI also, if you want to stuck to your VS Code, you can probably be on VS Code itself, just update your Docker extension or whatever, and you would have options to directly deploy from your VS Code to on your Azure portal. Okay. So here you can see that I did do Docker PS. It says everything is up and running. But let me see if I have my Docker Azure portal open. I can go to container instances. Okay, so I think I dropped it out after creating the video. So let me just quickly create this one. It shouldn't take much of the time. I will just go back to my terminal. I'll just do docker context ls. It is now on default, so I can go do docker context use Azure. Once I do that, I have my Docker login available. It should ask me to authenticating with existing credential because I already have logged in once. So now I can do Docker. I'll just copy paste the command here again. Once I do that, it should create, yeah, the context is already existing, right? So I don't need to worry about creating it again. Now I can actually, I'm already using the Docker context ls. If I do that, my current context is already Azure, so I don't need to worry about switching is also. So now I only need to do Docker compose PS or Docker compose up. So that's how simple it is. Once you do that, this would talk to your Azure ACI instances, and it will start creating your cluster, and then it will start deploying your containers from local to Azure ACI. Okay. Let's see. I think it should take around 30 seconds of time. Meanwhile, in case you want to look at the references, these are the references which I covered. The most of the code which I've taken on here in my repository is being taken from the ECS demo example. So all credits to those people for this code. I didn't have much time to create something from scratch, but I tried having another service here, which is salary service, to complicate the example and have 3 microservices instead of 2. So that's the modification I did on top of that. Now you can also look at the other repository for ACI integration. Both of them are in beta stage, and these are links of my slides wherein you can go and check these slides. And the demo code which I've used are also available in this repo called github.com at innoviz, and then you can see OSCONF Hyderabad talk. So let's go back and see. Yeah, so my deployment is done. I can just do Docker PS. Okay. If I do Docker PS, it should show that my application is up and running. Okay. So now I'll try the same thing. I will copy this whole thing here and go back to my browser, right? And my application up and running. So the same way it was working for either for local or for AWS ECS, it's working here as well. So it is able to talk to this whole service, the Flask service is able to talk to Redis. And if I again use the same thing also in my Postman to check whether my salary service is also available or not. So I can just post this whole thing here. Once you do that and add download as the API endpoint, once you do that, and I'm going to send this whole same payload. Once I do that, I should be getting some response. Yeah, the response is fine. I can click on my response URL. It would point me to another API called check and the task ID. If I do a get call on this one, I should get, first of all, yeah. So there's a delay of 10 seconds, so that has already happened. So it's giving me success. So it is working fine. Yeah. So now one thing, let's go back to our container instances and just do a refresh here. It should have my containers showing up here. Yeah. So my example is already showing up here. You can see that there are a bunch of information available at what is the resource group and what are the containers running here. So this way, I didn't have to worry about doing anything either on AWS ECS or on Azure ACI, right? Everything was done natively by these plugins itself. So, I mean, I really like that. But thanks to Ajit that for inspiring me to give this talk, because he only introduced me to these two plugins, and then I spent some time and learned about these plugins, right? So that's how cool it is. And yeah, I think with that, I think I'll be mostly be done with my demo and the things I wanted to cover. I'm open to questions, and in case you're not aware about some conferences happening, so there's a conference called PyCon India happening this year. Since I'm very involved with Python community, so do check out this conference, and also about the groups I'm part of, Hyderabad Python User Group, and also about DSUG Hyderabad. So yeah, I think with that I can conclude. Over to you, Savita.
Thank you, Sanchit. Would you like to take some questions?
Yep.
Okay. Is there a plugin for Google Cloud Run or something?
I have actually tried searching for it. I'm not pretty sure on that whether it is available or not, but I hope that Docker would definitely partner with Google as well to come up with some plugin of that sort as well.
Okay. There's one more question. Can we leverage the current Visual Studio Code Docker for Docker Code extension?
Yes, I think we can.
Okay.
So you should definitely check out. There's a blog I think I found out very recently. I was reading about that blog, Docker plugin for Azure ACI. So what I'll do, one thing, I'll find out that blog and probably would share the link on on the YouTube channel itself. I think this is the one wherein you can use the whole experience of VS Code. So if you look at this blog, there are a bunch of cool features now available, and using this whole plugin itself, you can deploy your containers from Docker, from local to Azure ACI. So it's pretty cool. I will share this link on the YouTube channel.
Sure. Thanks, Sanchit, for simplifying cloud application deployment for closely integration with container instances and walking us with the workflow in Docker and Docker CLI with all the content compute you want. Thanks again.